This next session that I want to talk about is what I refer to as poetic warriors. What I want to do is I want to give you a biblical definition of the masculine soul. We are a confused group of men. We don't know what it means. Our culture has not allowed us to really explore or see defined or modeled what a true masculinity really is. We've got metrosexuality, we've got cross-gender mumbo-jumbo, and people saying they can do whatever they want. We've lost the essence of what it means to be a man, what it means to be made in the image of God and to become all that He wants for us. So what I want to do is I want to give you a biblical definition so that you can understand masculinity, what it means to be a man from a biblical spiritual vantage point rather than just a cultural grid. So much of our understanding comes from what we see and hear and learn. And our culture today is not a good conduit for that. I mean, our kids in school are being told things that are so absolutely opposed from the truth. And they're confused. Okay, they're confused, and they should be confused. My goodness, there are no absolutes. I want to give you what I hope to be some baselines, some absolutes about what it means to be a man and what some of these struggles are. We've talked about these ambushes. We've talked about the journey to disconnectedness. We've talked about all of these different struggles that we have as men, externally and internally. What I want to do is I want to take that and I want to build on that. What is it that God wants you to become? What does it look like? First of all, understand this, that our physical bodies as men are pictures of our soul. Now, let me explain, and I don't want to get risque, but at the same time, we understand our physical bodies. We understand how we are made, physically, sexually, etc. We are made in a way that represents God's intent for us. That intent is to move in, to do something. Notice how a woman is designed by God, how she is formed. She is formed to embrace. She is formed to take in and bring that life back again. And we get all this confused, and I don't want to get into a controversial discussion necessarily about genders and what women should do and what men should do and why women shouldn't do this and blah, blah, blah. It's not important. It's not necessary. What I do want to do, though, is I want to challenge you in what we're thinking, putting away those things that are not true that we have been taught or told or seen modeled. And I want us to embrace a biblical concept of what it means and why did God design us the way He did and what was going on in the garden when God created Adam and Eve and what His expectations of them and of us are. So, men are called to go forth and put something in. I'm looking for... It went haywire, did it? Okay, well, I'll do one of those, take a dab here so we can cut this out. Men are called to go forth and pour something in. Again, that has representation in our physical bodies and what God has designed us to do in order for the race to continue, in order for there to be procreation and intimacy and oneness. There is that design that God has. I think it's interesting that men are designed the way they are, women are designed physically the way they are, and what does that tell us about the way we are to act, the way we are to live, the way we are to think? God has designed men to carry life forward with courage and imagination. That is basically my definition of masculinity. Men have been designed by God to carry life forward with courage and imagination. And that's why I like this idea of poetic warrior. It's that picture of strong and yet gentle. I mean, isn't it interesting that one of the most used concepts or referrals to men is when we are called gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen. How long has it been since you have identified, acknowledged that true masculinity actually involves gentleness? Gentleness is not weakness. Gentleness is not wimpy. Gentleness is knowing how to use our strength and knowing when our strength, our power, is not necessary. That's tough. That was really tough for me. I mean, my brother and I, it was just the two of us. It was a pretty masculine home, I would say, as far as that guy. I didn't really see a lot of femininity. My mom's a great lady, loves to cook and all the rest of it. She was a great mom, but she was a strong personality and had a German background, and she wasn't afraid to lay down the law and say what needed to be said. So we were used to that strength and just saying it the way it is and putting it out there. And I didn't learn what it looked like. In fact, my dad is a gentle man, and I misinterpreted that. I saw that as weakness. And there was a time in my life that I didn't respect that. In fact, it kind of ticked me off. And I think that in a way, that script from my past affected the way I lived my life. And so I kind of did the pendulum swing to the other direction. I wasn't going to be like that. I was going to have opinions. I was going to make myself known. I was going to have a voice. I wasn't going to be talked back to. I wasn't going to be made fun of. Okay, you hear what I'm saying? So I overreacted because I didn't want to be weak, but I didn't know how to be gentle either. And that cost me. I had to accept and acknowledge how that was affecting, especially the two women in my life, my wife and my daughter, and the effect that was having on them. The point in all of this is that I'm not suggesting that we stop being powerful. I'm not suggesting that we should stop being strong or that in our leadership is not defined with clear, strong boundaries. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how to use your power, use your strength, use your energy to be a blessing, to strengthen others. One of the great things that I believe God calls me to, especially when I'm with men, is to encourage you. Now, we get used to that word, so that can be anything from, hey, you're a great guy. No, actually, encouragement, simply defined, means to give courage. I want to instill courage in you. By becoming courageous, what you do is you know how to use your power. It's not for you. Courage is not for you. You look at the people we call courageous, what are they doing? They're laying their lives down for us in a foreign country. They're over there, they're being courageous. That's exactly what it is that God wants us to do as godly men. We have to learn to use our strength, to use our power for others, not just for ourselves. You know, it's kind of embarrassing now, but as I look back over my life, And like I said, I love and loved being a dad. I did, man. I love kids. I love my grandson. I mean, I want to just spend every moment I can with them. I love being with kids. I love hanging with them. I like holding them. I like talking to them. I love being a dad. However, I recognized in my heart that one of the reasons I wanted to be a good dad was so that the people I led as a pastor would say, he's a great dad. Now, maybe that doesn't sound all that bad, but here's the problem. If they didn't know what I didn't do, I was still okay. Because in their eyes, I was still a good dad, and I was a good dad. But there were things that I missed, things that I didn't do, things that I justified that they didn't know. So in their eyes, I was still good, and if I was good in their eyes, I'm okay. That's a mistake. That's not strength, that's weakness. That's justifying our actions, even though we know our actions are wrong. It doesn't cost us anything necessarily. So we have to be very careful about what that other-centeredness looks like. I don't want to confuse it. I'm not trying to make it more difficult than it is. I just want you to make sure that you're looking deep in your heart, because self-centeredness can show up in really strange ways. There was a young man, I was doing this seminar at a church, and a young man came up to me afterwards and asked me if I would be able to just meet with him for a little while. I said, absolutely. He came and picked me up at the hotel, and we went to a restaurant. We just sat down. I think we had some pie and coffee. We sat there and we talked for a while and just did what we do and shared a little bit about the weekend and so on and so forth. And he then told me why he was wanting to talk to me. He had heard my story. It resonated with him. He felt like there was something going on inside of him that he didn't really understand, so he wanted to see if I would, for lack of a better way of putting it, I think he wanted to see if I would side with him, that I would see where he was coming from. So he began to tell me about his life. He took me back, from that point, he took me back 7 years when he first got married to his wife. And he told me that during that time when he got married, he was actually having an affair with a woman at work for 2 years. First 2 years of marriage, the honeymoon stage, he's having an affair with a woman. His wife is a godly woman. She was involved in the church, and he was just kind of doing his thing, thinking he could do whatever he wanted. So he told me how he had come to the realization that what he was doing was absolutely wrong, and he knew it, and he confessed it, and he took it to his wife. His wife, they got help. She forgave him. They found themselves back where they were supposed to be. He started giving his heart back to the Lord. He started helping out at the church. They ended up in ministry together. They had a baby, their first child. So now we find ourselves moving forward 5 years or so, and he tells me how everything is just going great. He said, but recently, man, I'm just struggling with something, man, and I don't know what to do about it. He said, my wife has unusually large hips. He said, everywhere else, she's tiny, very small framed, beautiful woman. He goes, but man, it just turns me off. You know, and I look at her and she's got these wide hips and it just turns me off. And I've tried to tell her. I've asked her to go on a diet. I've asked her to do some things that might help make that better. And she doesn't hear me. She doesn't do anything about it. I'm not sure if he thought I was going to say, well, yeah, man, we've got to, we need to have a talk, and, you need to let her know that this is making you not be able to love her. I don't know what he thought I was going to say, but that's not what happened to me. He's telling me this story, and my heart sunk in my chest. I was like grieved. I literally felt an emotion that I think to this day was God's feeling of emotion in that moment. What I heard him saying, God heard, and I believed I felt a piece of that. I mean, it was just heavy. And he saw that countenance changed. He saw it come over me. He looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's all right." He goes, No, what? I want to know. I said, "Okay, all right." I looked at him. I said, You don't see how ugly what you just told me is, do you?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Man, you tell me that you had an affair the first 2 years of your life, of your marriage, that should have been the honeymoon stage? You tell me that your wife forgave you and now you find yourself in God's blessing as far as ministry and home. Your wife gives birth to your baby, which is probably one of the reasons that she has those hips, and you're telling me you can't love her the way God wants you to love her because of that?" I said, "Man, I'm sorry. That is wrong." Before I finished, and I don't think I said it with quite the energy I'm saying it now. We were in a restaurant, but I was sincere and I was very pointed. Before I finished, I looked at him and tears had begun to form in his eyes, and he looked at me, and here's what he said. I'll never forget it. And it's so representative of this power of self-centeredness that we miss. He looked at me and he said, "You know, I've never looked at it that way before." Isn't that amazing? We can sit here and think, what in the world was that guy thinking? How could... Self-centeredness is quite elusive sometimes, and because it's us, we consider it to be appropriate or normal or acceptable. But the truth of the matter is that we have to identify what it is that's really going on inside of us. What I believe is that there is something inside of all of us as men that longs for the adventure and the danger of making a difference. I believe we long for that. I'll tell you, I never dreamed of being a good boy. That was not my dream. I dreamed of being adventurous. I dreamed of conquering worlds. I had a dream, guys. I was pretty young. But I remember in my dream, I was being chased by someone that was trying to hurt me or kill me or whatever. It was a bad person. And I was running. I was running as fast as I could. In my hometown in Dayton, Ohio, there's this wide river called the Miami River. It's a wide, where it was the widest place that I knew of in my town. And I was running away from this person, and I came to this Miami River. And there was no way that I could have walked across it or gotten across it fast enough. And in my dream, what happened was, I'm running, and I remembered jumping off the shore, and I jumped all the way across that river, leaving my enemy behind me. Isn't that what all of us dream for? Now, I know that's a dream. But doesn't it represent something that's in all of our hearts? We want to make a difference. And sometimes it's dangerous to do that. But that is what God has designed in our hearts. So, the core definition of masculinity is this. And if I could just give you what I think is this basic concept that God has placed in us. And if we can get our hearts and heads around this, I think it can help you to leave here today and go into your world and make a difference. The core definition of masculinity, as far as I'm concerned, is this: the courage to create in chaos. Like a warrior, you go in and you do battle against tension in relationship, against loneliness, against sorrow. That is our job. We have been designed to do that. And what we have to do is we have to do that with the imagination of a poet, thus a poetic warrior. I want you to feel the weight of what it is that we have to do here today. This is not some easy little thing that we could just flip a switch and it happens. No, there is a heaviness to what it is. But the beauty of it is that God designed us as men to be able to carry that heaviness. And yet often, unfortunately, what we do is we shirk that responsibility. We avoid those challenges. We don't see ourselves biblically. We don't understand our masculinity as God would see it. And as a result, we miss some of the greatest opportunities available to us because we're unwilling to take the challenge or to take the risk. So the masculine soul is designed to be very aggressive. The masculine soul is designed by God. This is not just a male chemical thing, testosterone. Whoa, that's what makes me. No, God designed us with that to be aggressive. But what's happened is that our aggression has taken a bad form, and as a result, it's gotten a bad rap. Okay, so we have not learned how to handle that energy, how to control that strength, how to manage or direct that power. And as a result, we do damage instead of creating. We find ourselves alone because people are afraid to be with us. That may sound strange. It may be something you just have a hard time wrapping your head around. Later on today, before we leave, I'm going to have you ask some questions, if you'll do it, of your wife and others in your world. One of those questions that I ask men to ask their wives is, have you ever been afraid of me? I ask men to ask that because I remember the Lord putting that in my heart to ask Linda. I really thought I was safe with that one, like, there's no way. You know what? I asked her that question because she knew I would be safe, because she knew that she could be honest with me. Now, see, if you're not safe, you ask a question like that and they give you the truth and you get upset, or you say, oh, come on, I don't do that, then you've lost your opportunity for truth. You've lost your opportunity for change. So I asked Linda the question. And she said, well, yeah, there have been times. Now, she was referring to the past at that point because of what God had done in our marriage, but I still wanted to know. I wanted to know if it was still there or something. And she said, yeah. She goes, I didn't know what it was going to be like when you came home. I didn't know if because of something that happened at the office or some challenge that was overwhelming or the demands that were on your life or the preparation for Sunday's message or counseling that you did. I didn't know whether or not you would come home and it would all be taken out on us. We would feel all that you were feeling, and we didn't know everybody was walking on eggshells. I go, really? It hurt. I was bummed because it was after the fact, But if you can find out during the fact, because you're willing to take the risk, you're willing to move into that place that's awkward, then that kind of aggression, where you're moving in and you're identifying an enemy that was previously silent or unknown, doing espionage on you, and now you see it and you're going to destroy it. Now that's power. That's strength. That's wisdom. That's discernment. That is what God has designed us to do. If you have a teenager that is struggling and you wonder if they are involved in the wrong crowd, you maybe think that they're doing some things that you're not totally aware of. If you have the rule in your house that their bedroom is their safe zone, that you are not allowed to go into their room, that's theirs, you can't look in their drawers or check under their bed, then that is not being a protector. You have to know what's going on in your world all the time. You cannot give that away to somebody else. You cannot expect your wife to be the one to do that. That is our job. That is the aggression that God wants to use, where we're not going to let any enemy into our realm. So if my kid has marijuana in his drawer, I'm going to know about it. If he is out sneaking out and I find out, we're going to deal with that. You know, all of that kind of stuff. And so many times I hear parents tell me, well, you know, it was in his room and what? You didn't know? Why didn't you know? That's especially our job as men. Here's what I find. When men are not involved, when they're not providing that protection, the wife, the mom, because of her gift for embracing and encouraging and soothing, she doesn't have built into her that aggression or strength. She is going to typically side on the side of, well, I didn't want to make them mad at me, or well, you know, I'm never home and I just got home from work. I'm not going to confront anything because it's going to ruin the rest of the day. That's the general rule of thumb. We can't allow that to be our reality. So, how should a godly man be aggressive? I like Matthew 11:12. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it." Our aggression that's taken this bad turn is a perversion of the masculine aggression and passion that God built into us. So what we need to do is we need to move courageously into the chaos of life and relationship, not the chaos of job and backyard. The most important areas of our lives are to move into the chaos of relationship. That, believe me, that to me, that's the most chaotic. I'm not sure I even know what it is that's happening sometimes. Somebody said today when I was talking to them that our wives, emotionally and otherwise, sometimes can feel like moving targets. It's like, okay, I thought I had that figured out. Didn't you tell me that this is what you liked before? I mean, that's what I did. Well, you know, that's not doing it anymore. And that's like, what am I supposed to do with that? I'll tell you, one of the reasons I believe God has designed it that way with men and women is because it keeps us on our toes. We have such a tendency, because of our fallenness, to become lazy. And as soon as we think we've got it figured out, we love putting it on autopilot. Okay, now I can relax. Okay, wow, she's happy now. Well, I did what I needed to do, and so all is well. And I tell you, if that's one thing I've heard over and over again in counseling, it's the wife who is unwilling to give her heart back to her husband because she has heard it before and it doesn't happen. And she says, you know what, I have to have consistency. I have to see this being his heart all the time, not just for a week or a month. And you know what? She's exactly right. Because if we put it on autopilot and we started doing things that were the opposite of what they needed, then it's meant to be a wake-up call. Why has there been this assault on our marriage, for those of us that are married? And I know that everyone in this room is not married. However, that usually is the most intimate relationship any of us will ever have as men. And that relationship is certainly a place where the enemy focuses on dealing with or confronting our masculinity, trying to take us away from what God's design is. So, what are we supposed to do? Why is there this assault on marriage? Be sure of this: Satan's blows against you are by design. It's not an accident. And what you're dealing with, what you're struggling with, what your challenge is, it's probably because your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. And if you are willing to confront that, and deal with the fact that there is an assault on you. Why? Why is there such an assault? What is it that's going on? Why is this happening? You want to know why? I'll tell you why. Because the enemy fears you. He knows that if you ever get this, if you get this courage in your heart, he knows you will do unbelievable damage. He knows what you're capable of. Believe me, he does. He knows how God designed you. He knows what's in you. He's had to deal with it for generations. He's seen those men that have risen to the challenge and have taken their proper place, and what they've done is unbelievable. He knows that. So what's he going to do? He's going to put you in chains. He's going to get you wrapped up in unimportant things. He's going to steal away your joy. He's going to put you in a job that you hate. He's going to set you up so that your marriage doesn't make it, so that you fail, because he loves it when we fail, because he's a failure. He got kicked out of heaven. Who in the world would ever want that to happen? How could anybody be so dumb to get kicked out of glory? But that's what he did because of his rebellion. And so he wants all of us to do just the same thing. And he is going to zero in on you. So, a strong marriage is obviously going to be a threat to the enemy. Do you agree with that? A strong marriage is a threat. We don't have the time to identify what some of those threats are. But I'll tell you what, there's at least one that I would like to identify, and that is that if men took their rightful place as leaders, as aggressors, as fighters against evil, the church would be so unbelievably powerful. The church would be healthy. The church would be growing not numerically, but powerfully, exponentially. It doesn't need to be, not that I don't want it to be everybody, but the beauty is that even if it was a small group like was in the book of Acts, great things can happen. So it's not about numbers necessarily. It's about results. It's about what God can do through us. When I say that, it's about results. I don't want you to misunderstand. I don't want you to think that it's about works or result basis that God works in us. However, what I do believe is that when we are where we're supposed to be, there will be results. It's kind of like the given and it will be given unto you. You know, that we don't do it to get, but we know that if we do it, it'll happen. It's the same here. We know that if we are living in that realm, if we are living out our masculinity, not a manliness, but a masculinity that is designed by God, we can be sure that things will happen around us. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, doesn't mean there won't be challenges, but we can be sure that things will happen.